Welcome to this episode of the Understanding Marxist-Leninism series, part 4 of our series on Das Kapital. In the last episode, we talked about how capitalists increase profits by making workers stay on the job longer, what Marx called absolute surplus value. But there's a limit to that. Workers resist, laws are passed, the workday can't keep growing forever. So capitalists have another strategy. Instead of making workers work longer, they make them work faster. They reorganize production, bring in machines, and break tasks into smaller steps. The goal is the same: get more out of workers without paying them more. This is what Marx called relative surplus value. And in this episode, we'll explore how capitalists use cooperation and organization to increase production, how they divide labor to make each worker replaceable, and how machines, instead of making work easier, often make exploitation worse. These ideas aren't just about 19th century factories. Today, companies use automation, AI, and algorithms to squeeze more labor out of workers, whether it's factory jobs, delivery work, or even office tasks. Capitalists are still finding new ways to increase productivity without raising wages. So does technology just make work easier, or does it also make exploitation more efficient? Let's take a closer look. In the last episode, we talked about absolute surplus value, how capitalists increase profits by making workers work longer hours. But what happens when workers fight back? When they demand an 8-hour workday, does the capitalist just accept lower profits? Not a chance. Instead, they find a way to get more labor out of workers in the same amount of time. That's where relative surplus value comes in. Let's say a worker spends the first part of the day making enough goods to cover their wages. The rest of the day, they're creating surplus value, profit for the capitalist. Now, what if the capitalist can make the worker produce twice as fast? The worker still puts in the same number of hours, but now they finish their own share of production sooner. That means they spend even more time creating profit for the capitalist. That's relative surplus value. Profits that come not from longer work hours, but from making work more efficient. There are a few key ways capitalists make this happen. First, they increase productivity. This usually means improving tools, reorganizing work, or bringing in new technology. When machines do the job faster, workers can produce more in the same time, without getting paid more. Second, they lower the cost of necessities. If food, rent, and clothing get cheaper, capitalists can justify paying workers less. Why? Because wages are just enough to keep workers alive and working. If survival costs less, wages drop, and capitalists keep more profit. Third, they make labor more efficient. This means breaking work down into small, repetitive tasks. Instead of a craftsman making a full chair, one worker cuts wood, another attaches legs, another paints it. Each person does one tiny job over and over. This makes production faster, cheaper, with a workforce that is easy to replace. You might think that increasing productivity would mean better wages, shorter workdays, or an easier life for workers. But under capitalism, that's not always what happens. Instead of using new technology to help workers, capitalists use it to exploit them even more. Faster production means more profits, but wages stay the same or even go down. Here's the bigger picture. Capitalists must always increase profits. That's what keeps the system running, but they can't make people work forever. So instead, they make people work harder and faster. This isn't just history. It's happening today. Think about companies like Amazon. Workers are tracked by AI, forced to meet impossible quotas, and even have their bathroom breaks monitored, all in the name of efficiency. The goal is the same as it was in Marx's time: more productivity, more surplus value, and more profits without raising wages. So what's the takeaway? Capitalists always look for ways to increase surplus value. When they can't make the workday longer, they make the workday more intense. This applies not just to factory workers, but to all workers, whether you're in a warehouse, driving for a delivery app, or sitting at a desk with software tracking every click you make. Marx argues that when workers are brought together in large numbers under a capitalist, something changes. It's not just a bunch of individuals working side by side. It becomes a system, a coordinated effort that creates more than the sum of its parts. And of course, that system exists to benefit the capitalist, not the workers. Cooperation is when multiple workers come together to accomplish a task. Humans have always worked together, whether in agriculture, building cities, or organizing trade. But under capitalism, cooperation isn't about people working together for a shared goal. It's about workers being organized by a capitalist to make more profit. Think about it. If one person makes a chair from start to finish, they can only make so many in a day. But if 10 people each specialize in one step, they can make hundreds of chairs in the same time. The capitalist doesn't pay for this increase in productivity. They just take the extra profits. Marx explains that cooperation increases surplus value in a few key ways. First, it boosts efficiency. Workers can produce more when they work together in an organized way. The capitalist doesn't pay them more, but they create more value. Second, it allows for supervision. A single worker can't be watched all the time. But in a factory, capitalists can hire managers to make sure workers stay productive. Third, it makes workers more dependent. When workers are isolated, they have skills they can use elsewhere. But when they are just one piece of a larger machine, they become replaceable. This is why capitalists love large-scale production. It's not just that more workers mean more output, it's that organizing labor this way gives them more control, and that control translates into more surplus value. When workers are scattered, they have more autonomy. They can decide their own pace and working conditions. But under capitalism, cooperation is used to impose strict discipline. Factories aren't just about producing goods, they're about controlling labor. Workers have schedules, managers, quotas. Every movement is tracked and optimized for profit. Even bathroom breaks in modern warehouses are monitored to make sure workers aren't wasting time. Cooperation could be used to make life easier. Imagine a world where workers came together, shared knowledge, and used technology to shorten the workday and improve their lives. But under capitalism, cooperation isn't about helping workers, it's about extracting as much value from them as possible. Workers create more than ever, but they don't see the rewards. The profits go up, while wages stay low. Marx's point is clear. Cooperation is powerful. It's what makes large-scale production possible. But under capitalism, that power isn't in the hands of workers, it's used against them. That's why understanding who controls cooperation is so important. If workers controlled production, cooperation could make life better. Instead, it's used to make capitalists richer. So the question isn't just, how do we work together? It's who benefits when we do. Before large-scale manufacturing, a craftsman might make a whole shoe, chair, or piece of clothing from start to finish. It took skill, training, and time. But under capitalism, production is broken down into tiny steps. One worker cuts the material, another sews, another assembles, another paints. Each person becomes just a small part of the process. The result? Products are made faster, cheaper, and more efficiently, which means more surplus value for the capitalist. Marx describes two ways this process developed. Heterogeneous manufacture, where different crafts are brought together under one roof. Each worker still performs their trade, but now they work for a capitalist. Serial manufacture, where a product is broken down into stages with workers performing only one specific task. This is where the real transformation happens. When workers specialize in tiny tasks, production speeds up. The capitalist can now hire less skilled workers, people who don't need years of training, but only need to learn one repetitive movement. This shift changes everything. Skilled workers lose their independence. Instead of being experts, they become cogs in a machine, easily replaceable and completely dependent on the factory for survival. The division of labor is a huge boost to productivity, and that means more surplus value for the capitalist. First, it eliminates wasted time. Instead of switching between tasks, workers perform one action over and over. Second, it makes workers interchangeable. If each worker does only one step, they can be easily replaced by someone else or by a machine. Third, it makes workers dependent. A craftsman could survive on their own. But a worker who only knows one step in a long process needs the factory to survive. The result? Workers produce more value, but they don't see that value. It goes straight into the capitalist's pocket. This doesn't just apply to factory work. Even in offices today, workers often do highly specialized repetitive tasks, filling out forms, answering the same emails, or processing data. The logic of dividing labor still dominates how capitalism organizes work. The division of labor doesn't stop with human workers. The more work is broken down, the easier it is to replace workers with machines. If a single craftsman makes a shoe, it's hard to replace them. But if one worker just cuts leather and another just stitches seams, machines can be built to do those exact tasks. And that's exactly what happens next. This is where capitalism takes its next major step. The transition from manufacture to modern industry, where machines start to replace human labor altogether. And once machines take over, the capitalist's power grows even stronger. The division of labor is still shaping how we work today. Factories divide labor into tiny steps, so workers are replaceable. Call centers and office jobs break work into repetitive tasks that can be outsourced. Gig workers are controlled by algorithms, each performing just one step in a larger system. The logic hasn't changed, it's just evolved. Workers are still treated like parts of a machine, while the capitalist class reaps the rewards. In the last chapter, we saw how capitalism divided labor into smaller and smaller tasks, making workers more efficient, but also more replaceable. But capitalists didn't stop with just organizing workers. They found a way to go even further. They replaced workers entirely. This is the rise of machinery and modern industry. It's one of the biggest turning points in capitalism. And according to Marx, it's not just about making work easier. It's about increasing capitalist control and extracting even more surplus value. Before large-scale industry, most goods were made by hand, even in manufacturing. Machines existed, but they assisted human labor. They didn't replace it. That changed with the Industrial Revolution. Steam engines, power looms, and mechanized tools could now do the work of multiple humans, faster and more efficiently. Factories grew larger. Production skyrocketed. But what did this mean for workers? Before, skilled workers had some power. They had knowledge, experience, and a craft that made them valuable. But once machines took over, capitalists didn't need skilled labor anymore. Now, they could hire anyone, untrained workers, women, children, to operate machines. These workers could be paid less because the skill was now built into the machine itself. The result? A massive decline in wages, a rise in unemployment, and entire industries destroyed as machines made once respected trades obsolete. Capitalists always look for new ways to increase surplus value. At first, they did it by making people work longer hours. Then, they did it by making people work faster. But with machines, they could do something even better. Increase production without increasing wages, reduce the number of workers needed, make workers dependent on factory jobs. With machines, the capitalist doesn't just squeeze more labor out of workers, they replace workers whenever it benefits them. But the introduction of machines didn't just change who worked, it changed how they worked. Factories became places of strict discipline. Time was tightly controlled. Workers had to keep pace with the machines, with no breaks, no control, and no freedom. If a machine could run 12 hours a day, workers had to keep up. And if they couldn't, they were replaced. This isn't just history. Today, companies track every movement. From warehouse jobs to delivery services to office work, workers are still expected to match machine efficiency, even when it pushes them to the breaking point. Machines could free workers from hard labor. They could shorten the workday, reduce stress, and improve life for everyone. But under capitalism, that's not what happens. Instead of sharing the benefits of technology, capitalists use machines to replace workers, drive down wages, and concentrate profits at the top. We've covered a lot in this episode. Marx explained how capitalists increase profits, not just by making workers work longer, but by making them work faster and more efficiently. Through cooperation, capitalists bring workers together under one roof, not to make their jobs easier, but to organize them like an army, maximizing output while keeping wages down. Through the division of labor, production is broken into smaller and smaller tasks, making work more repetitive and making workers easier to replace. And with machinery and modern industry, we saw how capitalists take this even further, using machines not to free workers, but to make them even more disposable. The same process that replaced skilled artisans in the 19th century is now happening with artificial intelligence, automation, and gig work today. This is the reality of work under capitalism. Productivity has soared, profits have skyrocketed, but for the average worker, wages have stagnated, jobs have become more unstable, and surveillance in the workplace is tighter than ever. The problem isn't technology, it's who benefits from it. But we're not done yet. In the next few chapters, Marx takes us deeper into the core logic of capitalism. We've seen how capitalists increase surplus value, but where does that surplus go? And what happens when capitalists compete with each other? In the next episode, we'll dive into capitalist accumulation, how capital grows, how it reshapes entire societies, and how it leads to periodic crises that shake the system itself. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode.